Hi, friends. So today I'm going to talk about the fun little story about that one time that I had cancer. It was really funny. Um, I have to preface this video with a couple of things. Namely, one, I laugh a lot when I'm nervous. It is a coping mechanism for me to laugh and make funny little jokes, as you will see throughout this saga. So if you hear me laughing, just don't worry about it. That's just gonna happen, and you're gonna have to deal with that. Number two, my neighbor might be mowing his lawn, and my window is not well insulated. So if you can hear a lawnmower in the background, just pretend you can't, and we'll get through this together. Number three is obviously this video is going to talk about like medical things and cancer. So if that doesn't vibe well with you, I would consider maybe not watching this video. But I will say that this does end with me being mostly healthy. So don't worry too much. It's all gonna be okay. We'll get through this together, I promise. Anyway, so it all starts back in, I would say, probably either freshman or sophomore year of high school. I don't remember exactly, but uh, uh, one day I noticed that there felt like a rock in my cheek. And I didn't notice it normally, but if I touched my finger to my cheek, it would there's like a hard tiny little thing in my cheek. And I was like, "Ha, that's funny." A little while after I had noticed that, I watched a fun little video. It was on the Rhett and Link Good Mythical Morning, that whole thing, where they were talking about people who had teeth grow in weird parts of their bodies. And I watched Rhett and Link with my best friend at the time. And so it was like, hey, there's a weird thing in my face. I think it would be funny if it was a tooth that was just in my face, like that Rhett and Link video. And she was like, haha, yeah, that's funny. We'll just call it the tooth. So we called it the tooth. It became a fun little party trick. If I had friends or people who I'd met, I'd be like, "Hey, touch my face. There's like a tooth in the cheek of my face. It's really weird." And then they would touch my face and they'd be like, "What the fuck is that?" And I'd be like, "I don't know, but I'm calling it the tooth because I think it's funny." And people would be like, "Haha, that's funny." At the time, I had braces, so I kind of assumed that it was probably like callus buildup, because I sleep on the left side of my face. And so I thought, oh, it's probably like metal from my braces rubbing against my cheek all night that makes this tough little piece of callus in my face. And that's probably what that is. So I lived with that. I was like, that's cool. That's fine. That's probably what that is. It's totally normal. I should not worry about it. And I didn't. And I got my braces off eventually, way longer than I should have. I had braces for 8 years. Don't ask. Sore subject. Um, and I was like, ah, it's fine. There's still a rock in my face, but that's just funny. Every time I went to the dentist, every once in a while, they'd like x ray my teeth to make sure I still had teeth, I guess. And it never showed up on x rays. So I was like, I guess it's not a tooth, because teeth are x rayable. But anyway, then I was like, oh, whatever, it's fine. Didn't really think much of it. And then, cut to my freshman year of college, when I was around new people who were not children because we're college students and were technically adults, and these people had never met me before. And I was like, hey, haha, there's this weird thing in my face. Come touch it. And people would get concerned, these people who had just met me, and they'd be like, hey, we're friends now, and I am concerned for you that you have a weird thing in your face that you don't know what it is. That's alarming. And I'm like, you know what? That's probably alarming. So they were like, hey, the school that we go to, because we're college students, has like a free nurse. Maybe you should go there and see what's up with your face. And I was like, that's a really good point. So I call up my mom and I'm like, hey mom, I'm gonna go do that. And she's like, what weird thing in your face? And I'm like, the thing that's been there for years. And she pretended that I never told her, even though I absolutely did. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna go see the nurse at my school. So I make an appointment. It was a whole thing, and I show up to my funky little appointment, and I see the nurse at my school, and she was like, "So what are you here for?" And I was like, "Feel my face. Feel that like hard, weird thing in my face. What is that? What do I do about that's weird?" And she was like, "Ah, yeah, I don't know what that is. That's bizarre." But she said, "You know what? It's probably a cyst, and you should go to a dermatologist because that's what dermatologists do." And I was like, that's a really good point. I'm going to go do that. This was during my fall semester of my freshman year, towards the end of my fall semester. And then we're like, ha, time to go home because it's winter break, because I procrastinated this like a lot. So we go home for winter break, and I told my mom that they're like, they probably should go to a dermatologist. And my mom was like, maybe we should see our own general doctor at our house, which is, keep in mind, 1,000 miles away from my school, literally. Um, they're not close. But I was like, okay, we'll see this guy that has been my doctor my entire life, and we'll see what he says. And he is like, yeah, that's whack. I can't deal with that. I don't know what that is. That's not my job to deal with. I give you antibiotics when you have a chest infection or whatever. It's not my job to deal with whatever that is. You should either go to a dermatologist or an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do that. So by the time that happens, winter break is over. So I'm back at school. It's my spring semester, and I procrastinate more for like a long time. And eventually, my friend at college was like, "Hey, you should stop procrastinating and make an appointment with a dermatologist." And I was like, "That's a really good point." So I find a dermatologist place near my school, and I go there. As you do. And it's this very nice lady, and she looks at my face and she's like, there's no acne on your face. And I'm like, haha, yeah, it's like in my face. And so she feels my face and she's like, yes, that is a cyst. And I'm like, cool, cool, cool. And she's like, but that is too big for me to operate on. And I'm like, oh boy, it's gotten much bigger because in the span of freshman year to sophomore year, or freshman year of college, fall semester to spring semester, it had gotten like really big. And I was like, that's alarming. Like, you could see it. If you looked at my face, you'd be like, oh, your face is asymmetrical. There's a video of me doing cosplay makeup on my channel where you can see that my face is asymmetrical. It looks like my face is swollen. It's not. There's just a rock in my face. But she's like, yeah, that's too big for me to operate on. You have to go to either a plastic surgeon or an ear, nose, and throat. And I was like, well, But then she's like, but hey, there's a plastic surgeon in this building. Because it was like a big building full of doctor's offices. And she's like, so you can make an appointment with the plastic surgeon in this building and come back to the same place. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. So I took an elevator down 2 floors and went in to the plastic surgeon's office and was like, hey, there's a weird thing in my face. Can I have an appointment for someone to like look at it? And the receptionist at the desk is like, we can't take you until March. And I was like, super cool. I'll just wait like a month. So I go I go back to my dorm, I tell my mom what happened. She's like, okay, cool. I guess you'll just have to do that in a month. So my appointment with this plastic surgeon at my school was the day after we got sent home for COVID, which is perfect timing. That's just lovely. So I'm like, oh, haha, I'm home and there's a pandemic going on, so I guess we have to like put this off more. Haha. Eventually, the pandemic is still going on, but it's calm down enough that doctor visits that aren't like, you need to go to a doctor or you're gonna die, more mild doctor visits than that started to open up. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna go to a plastic surgeon's office. And I go to a plastic surgeon's office, and they're like, yeah, that's whack. That's like a big thing in your face, and I don't know what that is. And I'm like, ha, no one does. That's super cool. They're like, it's probably a cyst, though. And I'm like, so I've been told. And they're like, okay, you should go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I was like, ha, well, that's weird because it's not my ear, nose, or my throat, but you're the third person to tell me to go to ear, nose, and throat, so I'm going to go do that. So I go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he's this like old guy. He did not like my jokes. But I go there and he's like, "Oh, haha, that's not a cyst. That's a tumor." And in my brain, I'm like, "Tumor means cancer, and cancer's bad. That's scary. I don't like that that's a tumor. That's scary." And he goes, "But don't worry, some tumors are not cancer." And I was like, "Oh, super cool. Super cool. That's tight. I hope I don't have cancer." And he turns to me and he goes, "Do you chew tobacco?" And I was like, "No. Do I look like I chew tobacco? I don't even chew gum." And he's like, "Okay, well, you're 20 years old and you don't chew tobacco, so it's not cancer." And I was like, super cool. Love that for me. But he was like, "But you should probably get it out of your face because it's a tumor and it's growing and that's scary." And I'm like, that is really scary. I would like it to not be in my face. So he goes, "Well," and he comes up to me. I am in this doctor's office by myself because visitors aren't allowed to come in with you because there's a pandemic and they're trying to limit the amount of people who come into the doctor's office. So I'm by myself. I wasn't even 20 yet. I think I was still 19. No, I was 20. I lied. Anyway, was I? No, yeah, I was 19. I was 19 at the time. Anyway, I'm really bad at time. I apologize. But anyway, he was like, "Okay, here's what I'm gonna do." And he walks up to me and he puts his finger like under my jaw close to my chin, and he goes, "I'm gonna cut from here," and he drags up my jawline around my ear and then up into my hair, like into like the side part of my hair. And he goes, "I'm gonna cut all the way up here," and then he drags the finger across like towards my eye. He's like, "I'm gonna cut all the way up there, and then I'm gonna peel your skin off, and then I'm gonna scoop the tumor out of you, and then I'm gonna stitch you back up." And I was like, I literally just started laughing at him. And then he was like, "Why are you laughing?" And I was like, "Because you just told me you want to peel my face off." And he was like, "Yeah, you have a tumor." And I'm like, "That's so funny." I think it was like, I believe it was the next appointment. I had to like go back a few times to this guy. But I think it was the second appointment. I had my mom on speakerphone because I'm basically a child, freshly not a minor, don't know what I'm doing. And so he's re-explaining this procedure that he explained before, but he was re-explaining it with my mom on the phone now. And my mom goes, "Are you gonna have a plastic surgeon in with you to, like, if the face is asymmetrical because you just scooped out like a ping pong ball sized tumor out of it, then maybe they put like filler in so that my kid doesn't have like an asymmetrical face for the rest of their life?" And the doctor goes, "No." And she goes, "So is that a possibility?" And he's like, "Yeah, your kid's gonna have an asymmetrical face and be hella ugly forever." He didn't say this verbatim, but that was the vibe. And I was like, okay, that's fun. I like that. That's funny. Um, and then my mom was like, "So, do you know if it's cancer?" And he was like, "No, but I'm pretty sure it's not because your kid doesn't chew tobacco and is young and seems healthy." My mom was like, "Aren't you going to biopsy it?" And he's like, "Well, here's the thing. It might be a vascular tumor, which means it's like full of blood. It's like a blood sac, which sounds really funny." And he's like, "So if I biopsy it, you might bleed out in your face." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's super funny." So he's like, so I'm not going to biopsy it, but I am going to cut your face open, scoop your face out, and leave you cosmetically disfigured for the rest of your life. I was like, okay, that's funny. Uh, so I go home, and we have to like decide what we're going to do. And my mom is like, well, here's the thing. Your uncle is a doctor. And I was like, my uncle is a doctor. And she's like, your uncle knows other doctors. And I was like, that is correct. So we call up my uncle, he's my dad's brother. And he's like, oh yeah, maybe you should not do that. So he calls up his doctor friends, and one of them is an endocrinologist. He does that's like nerves and stuff. And he was like, oh, an ear, nose, and throat doctor should not be operating on you. I don't know why he said he would. That's really fucked up. Come to my doctor's office, and I'm gonna not do what he was gonna do. So we show up. We show up to his doctor's office. He's this nice man. He did laugh at my jokes. The other guy did not, so I already liked him better. And he was like, I'm gonna biopsy it right now. Hold still. So he takes out an ultrasound machine. He does a little ultrasound on my face. I had already had an ultrasound and an MRI because they had to like check stuff, but they couldn't tell anything from it because it was the wrong kind of doctor. But this other guy had a better ultrasound machine. So he's like, okay, hold still. He puts an ultrasound on my face, and then he takes a needle in his other hand and he shoves it into my cheek. I am looking the opposite direction so I don't see a giant needle coming out of my face because I didn't like that. That's not what I'm about. And then he puts it on a little lab dish thing, and he's like, all right, go home. I'll call you back and tell you if it's cancerous. And I was like, okay. So I go home. I go home, and a week later he calls back and he's like, hey, haha, so it is cancer. And I was like, oh, that's super funny. I like that. That's really fun. That's so fun for me. I have cancer in my face and it's been there for years and it's growing. That's really funny. That's so cool. And he's like, hey, you're not a musician, are you? And I was like, yes. Yes, I am that. And he's like, do you play any wind instruments? And I was like, yes, my primary instrument is a saxophone. He's like, oh, well, haha, see, the thing about that is, your tumor is intertwined with your buccal nerve. And I didn't know what that was, so he had to explain it. He's like, that's the nerve that if you blow your cheeks up, like when you're holding your breath and you go, I just did it, even though you can't see me, but it's when you puff your cheeks out, that's the nerve that controls that motion. He's like, so your tumor is like intertwined with that. So if I take it out, it might lead to permanent nerve damage and you might not be able to play your instrument anymore. Ever. And I was like, so what are the chances of that happening? And he's like, I don't know. I'm not going to know until I cut your face open. And I was like, super, super cool. Cool. That's okay, sure. And he's like, also, I can take you for surgery in August. I was like, sweet. Cool. I guess that's what's gonna happen next. So, flash forward. It's August now. I'm going to get surgery. I've never had surgery done before. I've been to a hospital, twice since I was born, and both were not great experiences. So I was like, haha, okay, sweet, it's gonna be fine. I might not be able to play my instrument anymore. I might have permanent nerve damage. Sweet. I show up. There's a bunch of doctors around. One of them is the guy who is going to put me to sleep. The anesthesiologist, that's the guy. The other guy is a plastic surgeon. He's going to cut me open and stitch me closed to make the scar less noticeable. And also, if he has to like put filler in to make my face symmetrical, he's also going to do that, which is very nice of him. And then there's the endocrinologist who's going to peel apart my nerves, scoop a tumor out, and hopefully be able to put the nerves back. I'm not a doctor. That might not be totally accurate, but that's the vibe. I was like, hey guys, what's up? And they're like, don't eat or drink water before your surgery because you might throw up during the surgery and choke on your vomit and die. And I was like, okay, I'll be sure to not do that. And then I show up and they're like, did you eat or drink water? And I was like, I did not. And then the guy who is the anesthesiologist was trying to put the thing in my hand, what's it called? The tube, the little needle tube thing. And he's like, hey, you're really dehydrated. And I'm like, I always am. He's like, it's difficult to find your vein. And I'm like, that's funny. But he eventually found it. He got the needle in my arm. I was like, super cool. I always thought that what they did is they knock you out first and then they bring you into the surgeon's room, do surgery, and then you wake up somewhere else. That's what I thought would happen. But no, they were like, okay, you're all dressed in your like surgical clothes. It's like a hospital gown, and I had like a hair net and like socks with little sticky things on it so you don't slip and fall. And they were like, okay, come this way. They had like markings all over me, like where they were gonna cut. They had a marking on my arm because if they had nerve damage, they were gonna take a nerve from my arm. And then they also put markings on both of my kneecaps because if they couldn't find an extra nerve in my arm, they were going to use my kneecaps. And if you couldn't get from that, they were gonna steal a nerve from a box in a freezer. I was like, this is super cool. So I go into the surgeon's room. They have me lie down on this metal table. There's like 6 doctors all in full scrubs and like gloves and hairnets and masks, and they're all holding scalpels like ready to cut me open. And they're all standing there and they go, okay, lie down on this metal table with this big scary light. And I was like, okay, this will be fine. So I lie down. I'm laughing the whole time because that's how I deal with emotions. And the anesthesiologist, I hear him say, okay, I'm going to put the anesthetic in you now. You're going to feel a slight pinch or you're going to feel a burning sensation. And then you're going to get tired and fall asleep. I was like, okay. So so he does that. And I remember feeling burning in my hand and thinking, but that's weird. I'm not tired. And then that's the last thing I remember. so, so I assume it worked. So I wake up and the anesthetic needle thing, the IV, that's what it's called, Jesus. Anyway, the IV is in my other hand when I woke up, which was scary because before they knocked me out, the anesthesiologist explained that they take the anesthetic out and you wake up within 3 minutes. And so I said, so if the IV falls out, you have 3 minutes to fix it? And he said, yes. I was like, that's terrifying. But I wake up and the IV is in my other hand. I was like, oh, so they had a fun little adventure. And the first thing I did after I noticed the IV had switched to my other hand, and I was like, that's scary, was I checked my arm and I checked my legs to see if there was incisions there, and there weren't. And I was like, oh, okay. So I probably don't have permanent nerve damage. And I felt my face. There was tape on it, like surgical tape, but there was no drain. They had said there might be a drain depending on how badly it went, but there was no drain. And I was like, these are all very good signs. So I'm tired because I just had a 4-hour surgery. It was 4 hours. And then a nurse comes in. I'm in like this, it looked like a giant hallway full of hospital beds of people also just waking up from surgeries. I was not by myself. There were like a bunch of people. I was like, this is weird. A nurse walks by and she sees that I woke up and she's like, took you a while to wake up. And I was like, excuse me, I just had 4-hour surgery. Let me sleep in. That's rude. But then she goes, what's your pain level? And I thought for a second. I was like, well, not very bad. So I said 1 on a scale of 1 to 10. I was like, because it doesn't hurt that bad, which was surprising. But she was like, okay, can you stand? And I was like, I guess. And so she's like, stand up. So I stood up. And then she's like, can you walk? And I was like, yeah. So I walked around. And then she said, walk to the bathroom. And I did that. And she's like, go to the bathroom. I was like, okay. So I did that and I come back out and she's like, well, you're walking fine. You say your pain is low. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, okay, you can go home. I was fully prepared, mind you, to go under in a 4-hour surgery, wake up, and then go home the next day because they were like, the recovery will probably last about that long. But I woke up and I was just like, fine. And they were like, okay, you can go home. So 2 hours after the surgery had ended, I just left. There was a ferry that was leaving to go back to where I live, and it was like just about to leave by the time they told me that I could go home. And so my mom showed up, and we like had to like run. I ran, and we got on the boat, and we went home. And I was like, haha, I get to sleep in my own bed. That's really cool. While we were on the boat, the doctor called my mom and was like, where'd you go? And we were like, we left. 6 months later, I got an MRI, and they said that cancer's probably gone, and it probably won't come back. But I do have to get an MRI every 6 months for the next several years, possibly ever. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. I'm probably cancer free now, assuming things stay as they are. But yeah, that's the funky little story. It was scary while it happened. I was in denial about lots of things while it was happening because I coped by just ignoring it. But I guess it worked out because now I'm fine and I have a cool scar on my face and it looks like I got attacked by a shark. That's the end. Goodbye. Have a nice day.